Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we'll explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. And we are back with another episode. And as always, I'm very excited for my guest this week. And this week we're talking to Ranger. This is somebody who I have kind of known off and on for the past year plus or so. And so we've become acquaintances and started talking more. And I'm very excited to learn more about Ranger through the stories that he's going to share today. And with that, I'm going to actually hand it over to Ranger. And so, Ranger, very glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's start with how would you like to be known and what would you like for folks to know about you?
Yeah, Paul, I appreciate it. Thanks for the warm welcome. You sent me the email and one of the questions was, how do you want to be known? And I came up with that kind of laundry list of 4 or 5 things. What was it? Like entrepreneur, philanthropists, humorous, whatever. I shared that list with my girlfriend and she kind of read them back to me out loud. And she was like, these are great, but what about a phrase? I'm like, what do you mean a phrase? And she popped one off that kind of made a lot of sense to me. And I want to be known as a person that's doing their best to make their best better and help others do the same. So I think that is how I'd like to be known. A little bit, not quite the answer that you asked for, but
no, it's actually, that's what's great about what we do here is there's no kind of script or expectations or hard template to follow. And I really appreciate what you brought to it because this is really all about us learning from each other and being able to kind of see each other's unique experiences. And if that unique experience is also wrapped into how do we present ourselves or how do we think about ourselves or how do we describe ourselves, then that's all part of it. And I appreciate that. That's really cool. It's kind of like having a tagline or an elevator pitch or, a brand promise or what have you, mission statement. We talk about all those things.
A little bit of a tongue twister too.
No, it's good. Well, let me ask you this. What you said your girlfriend presented it back and said, what about a phrase? And that registered with you. And you've obviously shared this powerful phrase with us. What's your favorite thing about that phrase?
I think my favorite thing about it is just the continuous improvements. A whole lot of, my coaching practice is the mountains and, reach your peaks, whatever that means for you. And I think that is really pivotal to it is that continuously improving your best to be better is kind of just like, what's the next peak? What are we going for next? Kind of like, I don't like the idea of, I peaked in insert time of your life or, I'm going to peak when. I think that your peak should be continuously going and you should be going for something else. So I think that really resonates in that regard.
It sounds like you really enjoy challenges and maybe the challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, I'm guessing we're probably going to unpack some of that in your story today. So let me ask you this. What else would you like people to know about you before we actually get into your story?
I do so many things. My day job, I'm an agricultural inspector with the county that I live in on the pesticide team. So get to deal with a lot of regulatory and enforcement work. Once I get home from my 9 to 5, I do my 5 to 9s, plural, which are, you can kind of see all the animals around me. I run a nonprofit based out of Sacramento right now called the Northern California Herpetological Society. If I have to say that again, I'm just going to say NCHS because it gets way too long.
Well, tell people who wouldn't be familiar what that means. Like which particular type of living creature is it that you focus on?
So herpetology is the study of reptiles and amphibians. So that's a lot more of the conservation and research side. And then herpetoculture is keeping reptiles and amphibians. Herpetological societies are kind of all over the US, and they're typically more dedicated to the research and conservation side. But our chapter, our organization is a little bit more geared towards rescue, rehab, and education. So we go to elementary schools, high schools, kind of things like that to educate folks on how to care for animals or reptiles and amphibians and why they're important to our local and not local ecosystems.
That sounds really cool.
And then my other 5 to 9, I'm also a coach. I'm going through the same program that Paul went through as well. So getting certified through the McLaren Transformative Coaching Essentials right now. A lot of my time is doing the homework, on the everlasting hunt for clients and more people to help and partner with. So a lot going on.
Nice. Yeah, so cool. And I know we're only in our, teens in terms of episodes and so forth, but someone commented to me recently about how it seems like so many of the people you're talking to are already kind of farther along and doing the work and, might be coaches. I said, you're good noticing, right? Like you're one of the many people that I know in these circles that I'm obviously starting with as we work on this podcast. And it's not so much that this is a podcast only for coaches. It's just that I'm in close proximity to a lot of coaches. And so you all are easy for me to access in terms of guests. So, and this whole podcast represents some of the principles of coaching too, which is awareness and discovery and so forth. Yeah. So I appreciate you sharing that. Ranger, before we get into your story, I want to do what I do with all of my guests, which is ask you, what is your intention for today, for this episode?
To share and dive deeper for myself. I want to kind of share my experience in case somebody else is going through something similar or knows someone that is. And hopefully through your questions and what I kind of heard you do with other folks on the podcast, kind of solidify a few things or uncover some of my own learnings and experiences so I learn more myself.
I see your dive deeper and share, and I respect the heck out of that. And I will also say that my intention for the episode is to create space for you to be able to do this, and that hopefully someone who hears your story will feel a sense of connection, see a little bit of themselves in you and your story, and maybe feel a little bit differently about themselves and others as a result of that. Maybe treat themselves a little bit lighter, treat others a little bit lighter as well. So, and I don't know what you're going to be sharing with us today, as with everyone. We haven't talked about what your story is today. So let's just jump into it. I'm really excited to hear. So the first question, as always, is where have you found yourself sitting on a comma in your life?
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking about it, listening to some of the other episodes and driving around for my day job. But a lot of my life since my freshman year of college has been kind of jumping from comma to comma and seeing which one stuck. So I'd say that college was the biggest one for me. I went to UC Davis in Davis, California. Ever since I was a little boy, I wanted to be a veterinarian, kind of jumping from feline medicine to livestock to horses to this to that. But I got into Davis for animal science. And, super excited, looking forward to getting into it. And my very first day of orientation, I think my dad dropped me off at like 8 a.m. or 9 or something. And within the hour or so, we were all 400 of us sitting in one of the big auditoriums for Davis, all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, all animal science majors. And the host, whoever was doing the MC, was kind of hyping us up for a second. You guys are the best of the best. Like, not many people get into Davis, especially for animal science. One of the hardest majors get into, making us feel good about ourselves. Then she goes, all right, if you want to be a veterinarian, raise your hand. So, all except for 4 or 5 of us raise our hand. And she said, all right, put your hands down. Advisors, raise your hand. And I think 10, 12 of them were advisors or student advisors. So they raised their hands. So 10 out of 300. And they said, cool, just so you guys know, to set expectations, statistically speaking, that's how many of you will actually get into vet school.
Wow.
And you kind of just felt the energy in the room shifts. And that was kind of heartbreaking for me because immediately, I was like, I'm confident, I got this. I was, salutatorian. I did all this in high school, this and that. And then I started talking to everybody else there.
And you saw yourself being a vet. You were one of the hands raised.
Yeah, no, right away. I was like,
okay,
why else would I be here?
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, my first kind of jab in the confidence, I had gotten waitlisted originally. So in my mind, I was like, I got in by the skin of my teeth, kind of like I shouldn't be here, but I'm still going to give it the best go that I can. So getting that first punch in the gut a month before, and then getting in and having them tell us that, it was kind of just kind of shaky. The wall was still there, but there was a few cracks developing. And then through that first week, just talking to other people in the major, kind of saying, oh, I am very average now, kind of going from, second in my class in high school, albeit very small high school, but, the leadership things I did, this and that, everybody else was like, oh, I did this, or I wrote an article that ended up in the New York Times, or this or that, or I did a mission trip here. Just comparing myself to others and seeing how everybody else was so much further ahead or had a better education or tutors or just things I had never heard of really put a jab in that confidence for me.
So if I may, let me jump in for just a moment, because this sounds like quite an experience, and at a particularly significant period of your life for folks who are able and interested and willing and actually get into secondary education, get into college. That's kind of like this precipice of this is what's next, and there's so much in our world that's packed into, and this will determine your future, right? Valid or not valid, that's kind of what the story and the narrative is. So here you are sitting on this same precipice, getting ready to start the next chapter of your life and potentially first page of your whole future. And coming in with, it sounds like, a certain expectation, and now something has really challenged that expectation.
Yeah, it kind of felt like, I thought I had gotten through the hard part. In high school, everybody was kind of like, oh, college is going to be easier, the classes will be harder, but you're going to be taking classes on things you care about. I didn't do too great my first year, and I spent a lot of time in the advising office trying to figure out, tutors or other resources. I'm like, what do I do? And that year I ended up joining a fraternity, the Alpha Gamma Rho fraternity, the Ag Greek Life house on campus. And I'll kind of get back to that later, but that is kind of what kept me going through college, was just that community of men that kind of pushed me to be better.
It sounds like this was, particularly challenging, as I've already acknowledged for you. What was the most challenging aspect of all of this that you've just described?
Really going in with the hard ones right away, huh? The vision, the idea I had of who I was and who I had made other people feel I was. Kind of like that, like, I guess, a reputation, I guess. Kind of all through high school, I was very much, Ranger's always doing schoolwork. Ranger's always getting it done. On the bus to football games, getting it done. On the way home, getting it done. Staying up till 3 a.m., just always, no matter what I had going on, sports, FFA, whatever, and, getting the work in, getting really high grades, kind of being the top of the class. So then to go to college and then have the advisors calling me, kind of putting me on academic probation within the first quarter or two. And that really just, even though like the only people that knew about it at the time were my parents, it felt like everybody knew, even though it was just, well, like my step-parents and parents, the 5-6 of us that knew about it. So I think that image that I had built up for myself the years prior, kind of coming to a standstill, kind of screwed that up for me.
I have questions, and yet I want to give you a chance to continue answering the first question. If there's more, if there's not, then we can kind of segue into these next questions. Let me just ask the question, and then you kind of decide where you would like to go.
Yeah.
What I'm really curious about is that you said, it sounds like, I'll paraphrase it back. In high school, you excelled. You put in the work, you excelled. You got as you used the word earlier, reputation, recognition, right? You had the recognition and the reputation for all of the hard work you put in. Now you're in college, and it sounds like those same things just don't work in the same way, and you're getting very different results.
Yeah, it made me not want to put in the work because it felt like it didn't matter anyway. Albeit after my first quarter, I did change things up and try to take one hard class at a time instead of 3 really hard ones at a time. I joined the fraternity my third quarter there, and then things kind of picked up from there and got a little bit better. And, I had more resources. I had friends. I wasn't dealing with you're going from having friends to your roommate. And my roommate really supported me through a lot of it. But my second year was when things started to kind of change. I went into the advising office after switching from animal science to animal science and management. Eventually kind of told me, like, I'm going to be real with you. Animal science isn't the program for you. We try not to tell people that, but everything is just going to get harder from here. Like, organic chemistry is going to go into biochemistry. Calculus is going to go into all these crazy higher things. You're doing better in your econ classes. You're getting B's and C's in there. What if you just focus all your attention doing that, and you can get that up to B's and A's? I said, all right, but I don't know what I'm going to do with this. And it was around that time that I was very, like, kind of the whole idea of Onakama as being stuck. I was like, I have no idea what I want to do. And I like to kind of keep myself busy and do things so that I feel like I'm making progress. But I had, my whole, what was that? Like, I was like 18 or 19 when I switched. So the 18, 19 years prior, I was convinced that I was going to be a vet. So now what? And I think one of the guys had said something kind of like, figure out what you want, like what road you want to go down by going through all of them, kind of. And I was like, man, you're right.
Well, it sounds like, because I was going to ask a question earlier, which was like, what was the difference between high school and college? But it sounds like,
Yeah.
correct me where I'm wrong, it sounds like you were so sure in your expectation that you hadn't considered any other possibility. And so when the thing you were pursuing and the thing that you were striving so hard for started to present itself as unlikely or extra challenging or whatever you want to call it, it sounds like you weren't prepared for the possibility that that might not be the path.
Yeah, I think that I had I think in high school, I was studying and I was doing things, but doing that same kind of studying didn't work. So I don't know if the coursework was just way easier or I had lower expectations, high expectations for high school, but low expectations transferred into university work. So as soon as, my few hours of studying didn't work the same way, I just had no idea what else to do.
Hmm.
And then that kind of just led to seeing a D or an F on a report card when I had never seen that before. Even before high school, when I was homeschooled, it didn't translate well. And it just hit way harder than it would have, I think, if I had had a struggle experience at that point.
It sounds like it. This all sounds like, I mean, so many things wrapped up into one big package. It seems like the second question, I think, is really relevant here because, yeah, and we can go back and forth. Obviously, this isn't a quiz, but what did this experience create for you? And I know you're going to talk to us more about year 2 and your fraternity, but while you're here on this comma that you've kind of set up for us now, what has this created for you?
I'd say possibility that I hadn't seen before. Because I think your reflection a moment ago is kind of spot on that as soon as something happened, I didn't know how to react to it, or it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. But I had also never considered any other career route. It was always be a vet, go to undergrad, go to vet school, figure out what focus you want to do, be a vet, own a vet clinic, hire other vets, name it something cute. That was kind of the entire track.
And very clear, by the way. I mean, even though you were just hitting the bullet points and the highlights, I mean, everything you said was exactly what any pet owner or even somebody who's in close proximity to pet owners knows. Yep. The vet experience is like in no way complete, but very clear. Like you had a clear vision, these milestones for what you wanted for yourself.
100%.
And so now you're looking at other alternatives. What else is happening at this point?
So around year 2, I started getting more responsibility in the fraternity. I was, newsletter editor. I think my sophomore year, I became recruitment chair. So on top of my other classes, there was a good amount of guys in the fraternity that were the same major as I was. So we had study groups, and I was trying to get other friends outside of the house. So I got more support there. I wasn't doing great, but I was getting through everything. I was passing. I was learning. So as recruitment chair, I was doing a lot more work, like kind of that recruitment aspect, sales, trying to figure out, kind of what people want and how to build community. If I kind of popped off every single thing I did, I was also doing some reporting work for something called The Tab, which is based out of the UK. They're at college campuses. It's like a newsletter editorial kind of a thing. So I was reporting, I was out there interviewing folks. I worked with TEDx UC Davis on the marketing team and became marketing director. So I was doing a lot of work where it was a lot of talking to people, and I like that a lot more.
What's motivated you to get involved in these things, particularly at this point now?
Yeah, I think that I kind of mentioned it before the second question. One of the guys had said something about you can't steer a parked car. And that's kind of how I felt, like kind of just paralyzed, not knowing what to do. And when he said that, it was kind of like, the way that I took it was drive down every road till you find one that works. Don't let your foot off the gas until you get somewhere where you want to go.
It's what I think I'm hearing is, if this kind of prevailing theme that you identified earlier is continuous improvement and challenge, you seem to have switched from there being one big monumental challenge that everything was directed towards to now, okay, I don't even know what the challenge is, if that's a fair reflection of what you've said earlier. So let me go try a bunch of things. It's kind of like the old, you can go deep or you can go wide or anything, in between. But now you've gone from deep to wide.
Yeah. And even in high school, I did sports year round, football, basketball, baseball. Well, I played football, sat bench in basketball, played baseball. And then I was doing Future Farmers of America. So speaking contests, I was president, I did ASB. So I was in high school, I was very much used to being busy 24/7. And thankfully I am privileged enough to say that my parents supported it and were able to drive me around, or I was able to get rides from friends. So acknowledge that to the side. So I was always willing and able to do a whole bunch. So I think that definitely transferred over, that as soon as I didn't have the focus of classes and the fraternity house at this point, I was like, well, I'm used to kind of being busy all the time. So I had, my junior and senior year, I worked on a sustainable farm. I worked in the soil lab connected to that farm, and I worked for an ag economics professor on campus. There will be a quiz at the end of everything.
Seriously.
So everything that I did, not getting paid wise, all of those were very much people focused. I was either recruiting, leading, mentoring, or with the philanthropy chair, for example, networking, getting out there, shaking hands, kissing babies, all that kind of trying to do good work.
And so what were you getting from that?
I think I was kind of getting the reps in. That's how I kind of view things. I was learning how to talk to people, how to, I guess, express myself and or clearly describe a mission. And I guess even from the very beginning, kind of enrolling folks in the idea of something bigger than themselves. Whether it was recruiting people for the fraternity, kind of when the guys slipped up or made mistakes as vice president, the president and I were very much like, hey, you messed up. What are we going to do from this? How can we be better men? Because that's the whole point of the fraternity, was to make better men, our little tagline. So I think that was something that was kind of, we set our purpose every meeting. A whole lot of it was hold ourselves to high standards and those around us to high standards. And kind of like what I said, when we do slip up, when we make mistakes, whether it was somebody said something they shouldn't have, or did something bad, or grades, or this or that, kind of like, I guess, kind of the coaching approach to it almost of, all right, you messed up. What will we do now? Like, what are you going to do to correct this? Do you want to get better? It's something that you want to do, or are we going to have to figure out some other agreement or arrangement?
Seems like,
so,
you've said learning how to be with people, this connection community, if you will. I'm also hearing what sounds like learning about accountability. You acknowledged enrollment. These are all important interpersonal skills.
Yeah, definitely.
And you said putting in the reps. For what purpose?
I think it might kind of go back to what I was saying earlier, like putting in the reps of driving down the different roads, where it is that I want to go. I guess kind of the reps of trial and error, like what works, what doesn't work, not just communication wise, but what works in terms of what I want to do, what doesn't work in terms of what I don't want to do.
What I really appreciate and want to kind of acknowledge you for is, in every episode, I'm a big proponent of there's no good, bad, right, or wrong. So, no episode is about telling people what to do, how to do it, giving advice or anything like that. But what I want to acknowledge you for is you're doing all of these things. You're experiencing what you're experiencing. It seems like, oh, this is coming to me right now. So tell me if I'm off base here, or correct me where I might be wrong. But it seems like once you faced the possibility of having to let go of the original dream of being a veterinarian, and you flat out said that opened up possibility for other avenues and other possibilities. Seems like once you let go of the original dream or whatever it was that you did with that, it seemed to open up or remove some pressure or expectations from how long, and in what ways you pursued all these other things.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. The way that I kind of feel about that is that the veterinarian dream, I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't let it go. It kind of felt like I, opened up the cabinet, shoved it in there, and closed it for the time being.
So set aside then.
Yeah, because I mean, I had like a gecko my freshman year. I had a few other animals kind of come into my possession throughout college. So that animal aspect was still always there. It just wasn't I mean, other than me trying to get people to think I'm cool for having a snake and lizards in my room. Other than that, it wasn't like the goal at that point. It was just kind of like I want to have the critters around because they're fun.
Yeah. Well, and you're still in that environment. You're still immersed in that environment. So it's not unlike someone who maybe has a dream of becoming a surgeon. Let's try to be specific, because being a veterinarian is being a doctor. But somebody having a dream of being a surgeon, for example, and then their path takes them on a different direction, right? And maybe a surgeon isn't the destination, but it doesn't mean they leave that field altogether sometimes, right? They still learn about surgery. Maybe they go into a parallel type of profession or a supporting role or research or what have you. So it sounds like you parked and put in the cabinet the vision of becoming a veterinarian for now. But you're still in that environment. You're still doing those types of things. You're still exposed to and working with animals. You still have the passion.
I forget. I did so many things in college. I worked with the sheep department. I worked in the poultry department and the cattle department. And that was kind of my first and second year when I was still thinking of going the vet route. So it's definitely still there. And I still was around it. It just felt different.
And yet the acknowledgement again, you didn't walk away from it all. You didn't decide to suddenly go becoming an accountant. Yeah. Right. So just, I want to acknowledge you for that, because, just because the dream kind of ended up with a comma or a question mark didn't mean that you just completely walked into another room altogether.
Exactly.
The next question is really kind of well timed, because you said, I did all these things, we just got through recapping some of the things that you got and for what purpose you did all these different things, especially with the fraternity and so forth. What did you learn about yourself as a result of this comma?
How adaptable I am. I think is that kind of whatever environment I was in, the soil lab was very much attention to detail, put your head down, measure the soil, record the results, this and that. Kind of the same thing with the econ departments, data scrape, put it together, make graphs, this and that. Whereas working for TEDx UC Davis was manage a team, get out there, talk to people, shake hands, get them to buy tickets. The fraternity was get out there, talk about the fraternity, shake hands, enroll them in the fraternity, see if this is something that is good for them, good for us, start this event, run this event, get people involved, do the marketing. And I'm not going to say I was a pro or an expert at any of them, but I was still able to do some pretty cool things and put in the work. And I was able to kind of develop really good relationships, make friends in all of those areas and interact with different folks. So I'd say the adaptability interpersonally and work-wise, I surprised myself there. Because I think it goes back to kind of what I said earlier. In high school, it was football, basketball, like sports and FFA. And those were all very much kind of that idea of put the work in, do the hours, shake hands, talk to people. So I was used to that portion of it. But I think that doing the other work showed me that, yes, I do have the attention span to do these different things. I can sit down for hours and focus on one task. And keep myself engaged and interested in what it is that I'm doing.
So I'm going to ask the question then, because this is a theme in what you're sharing so far, right? This theme of putting in the work. It seems that's proving something to you.
Yeah, which when you say it that way, I think I had kind of said that at the beginning when I first got to school, that I wasn't. I had one way of studying and that didn't work anymore. So I had no idea what to do at that point. And I just wasn't really putting in a whole lot of effort into the schoolwork at that point. once I had something that, I felt confident in, and, I can do this task. I know the point of it. I can explain it to other people, and kind of started rebuilding that confidence that I could put in the hours, put in the effort, and
Mm.
make something from nothing, or add to something bigger than the work that I'm doing.
So it sounds like there's this correlation then between doing the work and your level of confidence, proving capability. What's your I'll throw the question out there. Maybe it's relevant, maybe it's not. But what comes up for me when you talk about that is some of the schools of thought out there around the difference between waiting for motivation to make things happen and making things happen, which creates motivation. And I don't know what my intention is in bringing that up, but in you sharing what you shared, that kind of comes up. Where do you stand with motivation versus action and their relationship with each other?
A big thing for me is the difference between motivation and discipline, which has been a much bigger thing the last couple of years after college for me, because I wasn't motivated to go to school. I wasn't motivated to kind of put myself in all these different areas. It was a lot more of like I need to do these things. I need to go to class still. I need to show up. Otherwise, I'm going to miss out on opportunity. Like I know I want to do this. I know it. I want to. But even though I'm not motivated, I need to pull myself out of bed. I need to go. I need to do these things.
And to be clear, that motivation changed after those first couple of days. Is that right? When it seems like when basically you were told that your dream may not be possible.
Yeah, it was a lot more of like I will say that I was very motivated to go to Davis. I wanted to be a veterinarian, this or that. And then it changed from motivation, I would say, to discipline. In terms of I committed to this, kind of that economics of hope, in that these are my resources. This is the outcome I'm going for. Once I complete school, once I have a degree, once I can get out of here, kind of put more time into myself, then I will figure out what I'm going to do. But I'm not going to figure that out unless I get out of bed, go do school, do these extracurriculars. I think that's kind of where that discipline aspect came in.
It sounds a little bit like your focus was on doing the things, exposing yourself to as many things as possible.
Yeah.
And that possibly, whether you were aware of it or not at the time, you gave yourself permission to not have to, air quotes, I'm putting my fingers up in the air, figure it out or know what the point was. It sounds like kind of your focus was on trying. And as you already said, the discipline.
Yeah, because I didn't really. I would apply for things if they looked cool, but it wasn't like I want to do this the rest of my life. Like at one point, another job Ranger had. I worked in the walnut research department doing transplanting and collecting nuts and this and that, because this girl I was talking to convinced me to get the job there and work with her. And this girl I was talking to is now my girlfriend of 5 years. So just like these different things, different experiences, really kind of putting myself out there, like you said, to get the kind of collect the experiences and figure out what to do with them later.
Collecting the experiences. That's really powerful. What does that mean to you when you say that out loud?
So a big thing that I kind of do is try to gamify my life, kind of like the video game approach to it. Like, and I don't know if you've ever played video games.
I was the generation that created them. So yes.
Atari,
Asteroid, Pac-Man. Yes.
So I think a lot of it is kind of like, you can't shoot the fireball until you learn how to do the basic magic. You have to get this skill in order to get this skill, which eventually gets the skill that you want. And I think at that point, it was kind of like, get all of the base skills, so that depending on which route you want to go down, you can kind of have your pick at what you want to do. And that's kind of how I see that and how I see things right now, especially with like the coaching business, public speaking, talking to people, like very basic. The next one is selling. The next one is learning about coaching. It's just like very much like, what's the next thing? Accounting, marketing, network, it's very much like a skill tree. And that's kind of how I see it in what's going on up here.
Yeah. Skill tree. I like that. In my mind, I was thinking skill stacking, but skill tree is really cool. Yeah. So you're adaptable. you're kind of collecting skills at this point. And you said really the learnings didn't start happening until, well, many of the learnings, or maybe the most distinct learnings, didn't start happening towards the end of school. What did you start to discover by then about yourself?
Yeah. So I graduated in December of 2019. I moved out of the fraternity house back in with my mom January 1st. And I kind of had that also idea that as soon as you graduate, you get the $100,000 a year job. It kind of just gets handed to you and they say, good luck, bud. That was not the case.
Mm-hmm.
After hundreds of apps and a bunch of different interviews, everything kind of fell through. And then middle of January, I got a job with the reptile store in Modesto. So I was working there, January 20th or something was my first day. So 2 months later, the world shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So there I got a lot, kind of the skill stacking thing or the skill tree. I got way better at sales and I got way better at talking about animals, especially reptiles and amphibians. I mean, my room's covered. I'm pointing up right now, but that's where all my spiders are. I have geckos and lizards all around me in my room. So I got really deep in there. About 6 months later, or June or July, I moved back to Davis for a job doing produce sales for a company in Sacramento. And I was like, I know how to do sales now. I know a lot about ag. I did all these different things. The problem with that one was it was door-to-door sales, middle of the pandemic, very beginning, during the California wildfires. So people weren't happy to see door knockers on their porch, exposing their family to germs and letting all the smoke in. I was there for 3 weeks. And the first week was training indoors at the facility. So I went back to Davis, got a job in a bar, serving drinks until 2 a.m. And that was around the time, I drank a good amount in college, and then I graduated, didn't really do a whole lot. And then on the bar scene, I wasn't drinking every night, but it was still very much the culture. And that was starting when I was like, why do I feel like I have to do this? Otherwise, I can't have friends. That doesn't make sense. And I was kind of making that connection to college. And around that time, I also got a job at a vineyard. So I was doing a bunch of different things there, working in the tasting room, doing field work, kind of all over the place. And there I was like, oh, I like, at the bar even, I like talking to people. I like building relationships. I like learning the complicated drinks and the not so complicated drinks. It was fun. I had a good time. I felt, my brain was stimulated and I felt good. I ended up getting another job at a different vineyard. And it was there that I was doing even more, the viticulture side, working out, driving the quad around, doing grape samples, collecting data. And I was also working in the tasting room and, learn, the different cranberry notes in the Pinot Noir that I made up at the time. If you try really hard, you can smell marshmallow. It was there at that vineyard that I ended up meeting you. And, I tell the story, I was serving this group of men and I was making up things about the Pinot Noir and the Cabernet. And one of them was like, oh, well, what's your life story? And I was like, oh, my favorite question. I think I had shared a little bit of this with you. Like, oh, I went to Davis for animal science. And it was around that time that back to the Herpetological Society, I had been elected president. And fun fact, I was elected president while I was on lunch at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday while I worked at the bar. The previous president had dropped out for whatever reason, and I was the only one with leadership experience. And we make the joke that I was dumb enough to say yes and put myself in that position. So I got voted in and then have to hop off to go make drinks. But I mentioned that to you, and you said, you have to meet my friend. Her name is Jocelyn. You're going to love her. And I tell the story like this kind of too, I was a little scared. I was like, okay, this man is giving me people's phone numbers. Like, sure, anything for a tip, I guess. And that was, I'd say, when the learning actually started happening, because I met with Jocelyn and she's wonderful. And we can sing her. This can be the Jocelyn Love podcast if you want it to be. But I met with her. She mentioned that you guys were in the same coaching program. We didn't really talk about that a whole lot, but she meant, it's helping people get what they want and getting clear on things and getting unstuck. I was like, okay, cool. Sounds like a bunch of, woo woo head stuff, whatever. And then I think a week or two later, I was like laying in bed, still struck, like, what do I want to do? I'm not getting enough hours at work. I'm doing all these side hustles, selling tarantula enclosures, trying to make candles and doing yard work for people. I'm like, I still feel like I'm on the same hamster wheel that I was in college.
Mm.
And then I remembered Jocelyn's conversation, kind of like, get organized in your head, get unstuck. And I Googled, like, what is a life coach? Like, is it a scam? Is what is this thing? Because you hear bad things about it.
Sure.
And I was like, I'm gonna text her. So I texted her and I was like, hey, can you tell me more about this coaching thing? We hopped on a call. I was like, screw it, like, sign me up, take my money, let's go.
It's also a testament to the power of connections and the power of, as you said earlier, collecting experiences, being open to new things. Because kind of where my journey intersected with yours, that was just a couple of months before I actually quit drinking. So yes, I was at that vineyard, and yes, I was wine tasting with a friend, and it was interesting because when we were just chatting, as people will do, at wineries and so forth, and you were mentioning the reptile piece, in this part of your life, and Jocelyn works in animal care and animal training and things like that. And that was initially what prompted me. It's like, oh, you're curious. And like, I know somebody who does animals too. It's kind of crazy. It's like, oh, I know somebody from New York too. Never mind the fact that there's, 8.5 million of them. But, your story intersects with mine, intersects with Jocelyn's as a sheer result of all of these parties here being open to whatever and being okay with, like, hey, I don't know if there's a purpose to this or not, but let's just put it out there. From you talking about and answering my questions, me throwing out Jocelyn's number, you being open to calling Jocelyn being open to talking to you about things, like, and now here we are 2 years later, right? So just an acknowledgement of that,
Yeah.
that it's crazy how paths can cross, and that you just never know which person on your path might actually, have something to do with where your path goes next.
Yeah. And I kind of talked to one of my buddies about that before, kind of like like him and I, like, we became friends because we knew this person. The only reason I talked to them was because I knew this other person. There's kind of like that butterfly effect almost. It's like it all started because I dropped this during a chemistry lab.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting how such small things lead into something bigger and greater down the road.
Oh, so many directions we could go with that too.
Yeah. And, I enjoyed my time at the vineyard and at the bar. Like I said, I really enjoyed learning about the different drinks and how to make them. I also learned that I just don't like drinking. I don't feel great about it. I'm not fiending for a drink by any means, but I'm also not wanting to partake anymore. I wouldn't say that I'm 100% sober. I try things here and there. It's just not what I want to do anymore.
And it seems to reinforce for you, Ranger, again, when you talk about trying all the things and experiencing all the things, it's not just all the things that you do try. It's also some of the things that you try and you realize you're done with. Right. So,
and being open to that, I did this in the past. It's not what I want to do anymore. It's not ruining anything, but it's not making anything better. I'm going to cut it out.
Yeah. It's just a really important point that I think would be really empowering for listeners, is that trying all the things doesn't always mean adding. Sometimes trying all the things means taking things away too, removing things, right? Picking up things and putting things down. So I think that's a really powerful example. Thank you for sharing that. So as you look back on the story that you've shared, you've talked about what you've learned about yourself. What would you say has changed as a result of sitting on this comma?
I think the confidence in myself that I can do whatever it is that I want to do, and not just that I can do it, but that I can do it. Like I can get to the outcome, but I can do all the steps that lead up to it. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, like, to get off of this big comma, it's getting to the next smaller one. Kind of like the way I kind of see it is like there's the big comma. It's like, I don't know, like a pond almost. And then the smaller ones are the stepping stones that you kind of jump across. You fall in the water, pull yourself back up, maybe try a different path. I think that's the thing, is having that resilience that even when things don't work, what's the next step?
Again, what I notice is this, as you said, like it's not just the outcomes. It's not that I can, my confidence in myself and that I can achieve the outcome, but I can also do all the steps. And again, I see that theme, surfacing again, this kind of somehow proving something to yourself. What else? What else has changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, to kind of wrap up what I did in college and high school and all that, I think it was our second 12-week coaching session that Jocelyn and I had. Like at the very end, it was kind of just wrapping up, like, here's all, like, I'm like, I want to figure out what I want to do. Like, I've done all these things, I keep trying things. I want to figure out what it is that I like out of them, and see what the threat is. And, collecting all these different, TEDx UC Davis, marketing, this and that. Like, I like talking to people. Great. I did yard work for folks. I like being of service to people and providing value. Great. Like, that's the word that comes out of that. Like, service, value, mentorship, cuter word for pushing people to be better, kind of like believing in them. So kind of like all these different things. And I think I'd said to her, I just want to do for other people what you've done for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I remember it was, she kind of just stopped and said, can you say that one more time? Which maybe she just actually didn't hear me or wanted me to reflect on it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my God, I want to be a coach. Like, that wasn't the whole point. I'm like, have you been trying to recruit me this entire time? And she's like, no.
Mm.
But I was like, no, like I started looking into it a lot more. Like, no, I want to help people get unstuck. I want to help them get to the next level. Cause I'm like, these are all things that I have been helping myself do the last few years.
Mm.
And I wish that I had met someone like Jocelyn or Paul, or like, somebody sooner that could have helped me with this.
Yeah.
But I want to be that person for someone else.
Well, you said, I want to do for other people what you did for me. And the revelation was revelation. Revelation combined with realization is revelation. That's a new word. Let's package it. The revelation or the realization was that I want to be a coach. So let's say, okay, that's the container, that's the role title.
Yeah.
What was important? Set aside the title coach. What was important about doing that work beyond what you've already shared?
Yeah. I think that,
Like, why that job?
I could start like a handyman job where I still am of service to people. I make their life better. I provide value. But I think that what really got to me about coaching was, it just feels like it's a lot more of it's not just like oh, here's this small hump that I want to get over and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a redirect. Like,
Mm.
I am putting my life in a direction that I don't want to go into anymore, but I don't know how to get off this road.
Mm.
Kind of like what I'd mentioned earlier, trying all these different paths. Like, well, if you don't know how to get off this road, let's figure it out so you can get on one that makes more sense for you. And I don't feel that that could have been done with any of the other business ideas that I had, especially with how in depth you get with people as coach or as a client. I just feel like that 3, 6, 9, whatever, however many months you're with a coach every week changes things for you and can really shift how you see the world, how you interact with other people. It just makes a lot larger of a shift than other things I was doing. And that's what I liked about it. There's the bow. Sounds prettier, I think.
Yeah. Well, so let's take it a step further. Let me either untie the bow, or let's like lift the bow up and go under the paper. That's, you described kind of the outcomes and the actions, but what do you personally get out of doing this type of work?
I really like seeing other people grow. I think that that's a really big part of it. I have a really big belief that as an entrepreneur or business owner, my job is to provide as much value as possible for those that I work with. And as coach, I don't tell people what to do. I don't do the work for them. But if I can help them see things in a better way that gets them where they want to go, those kind of like wow moments, or I've never thought of it that way, or even just with one of my clients, it was like everybody here thinks that I am lesser because I'm new. It's like in a group that she's a part of. And I was like, what if they don't think that? Like what I thought was a very basic question. And it just changed her entire perspective walking into the room, just a different person, the confidence, the way she carried herself. It was just like, I don't know how else I could have done that.
I'm still going to press a little deeper here because I think
Okay, yeah.
first of all, I love this. I love this conversation. And I also love kind of digging a little deeper, and I do it in different ways with different guests, but you're still kind of describing, even when you say, I like to see people grow, I'm still curious why. I'm still curious about the why. Like, what are you getting out of that? You describing what you like to see.
Maybe it does go back to what I said earlier, that I had created that image of myself for being the one that excels. And I think that it feels like the more I excel as coach, the more other people excel. And I think that kind of, I think I've described it as the ripple effect. Like, sure, I can be the perfect little stone on my own, but once I get thrown in a pond, what comes out of that expands out. So it's the better that I get at coaching or whatever it is that I do, and I help others get better, I think it just makes the world better in whatever small, large butterfly effect kind of way.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you say essentially is that it's important to you that we all rise together.
Yeah, there we go. There's the bow.
And and disclaimer, life doesn't have to have a bow, but if it comes with one, great, right?
We're all for it if it does, but that's not a requirement.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds very important to you that the things that you do have meaning, have an impact, and that you're coming to discover how much you enjoy work that impacts other people. And if it can help other people rise, all the better. That's powerful. Ranger, last question. What does getting off the comma look like for you?
It just kind of feels like finding the next one. Like getting off the comma feels like you are prepared to get onto the next one because you know you're going to be able to get off.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing you say is, in a way, what I think I'm hearing you say is that there will always be more commas, and each one can help you be more prepared for and handle the next one that will surely come.
I've said the same. So all of my imagery and my coaching is mountains. And if you replace comma with mountains, it's so similar. So when you say it that way, I'm like, that's what I'm getting at.
Well, and it bridges back to the beginning of the conversation when you were describing yourself as someone, I don't remember the exact words, but you were describing peak to peak, challenge to challenge, right? Mountain peak to mountain peak. So the trying all the things, the journey of it all, getting off the comma is preparing you for the next trip or the next climb or the next whatever metaphor you want to use.
Yeah. Insert metaphor here, kind of.
Nice. Ranger, what would you acknowledge yourself for, given our conversation today?
I want to acknowledge myself for being willing to do this. I'd seen the podcast before and I'd listened to a little bit and I was like, man, getting vulnerable on camera and recording it, and it almost feels like a coaching session. And I do think that I, from my perspective, hit my intention from the beginning, which was to go deeper and learn more about myself. And I'm sure I'll hear from others if I hit the other part of that intention of providing value and helping other folks that might come into the situation.
Well, and thank you for that. And I want to acknowledge you for doing just that, right? Showing up and being willing to bring your stories here to us. And there's so many, really impactful things to share in your experience, and being able to describe stories that aren't necessarily easy for folks, especially when it comes to expectations. And to a degree, we didn't really use the word identity, but it seems like, really kind of unpacking, looking at, and even questioning identity, in your storytelling.
Let's go back and replace when I was talking at the beginning. I was like, that this expectation or image of myself, identity, that's the word I was looking for. I had the identity of being someone that was smart and capable of doing school well. Copy paste that there at the beginning.
Yeah, let's just re-record the whole thing. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, well, but and that's the beauty of these episodes, Ranger. And like you said, like feels a little bit like coaching. And yeah, these aren't meant to be coaching sessions, but but they are really ways of unpacking experiences and talking about them person to person the way you would with a coach, right? And they're not perfect. They're not meant to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect in this. And like you said, we can go back and change words. But I want to acknowledge something is like I kept pressing on this whole something about, proving yourself, proving yourself, proving yourself. And now that you've just said what you said,
Yeah.
the identity, that's kind of what I was picking up on too, is what does this say about you? Right. And so, yeah. And yet the story still pans out. It still tells that story, right? Whether we change the label or not, it's still sending the same or communicating the same experience and the same message.
Yeah. Just really trying to figure out what I think that might be the common thread is I have this original identity, and that college experience was what is the identity, and finding all those base level skills. And now it feels like I'm a lot more in all right, you have that base level identity. What are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
God, identity. That's the word. Thank you.
Powerful stuff. Well, I mean, let's close that thought out then. So what difference does that make, replacing expectations with identity? What does that do for you right here?
I feel like it just kind of, I guess physically, it's almost like a weight off my shoulder. I'm like, that's the word. Like it kind of releases that energy, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big thing that I've noticed too is it an external pressure or an internal desire? Kind of like it felt like that, like I said earlier, everybody's going to know that I'm a failure. Everybody's going to know I'm not doing well in school. But it was really that entire time was my identity of being the person that would be the top of the class was broken and gone. Now it's through coaching, and like after college, it was kind of that rebuild, like, all right, the original pieces aren't there. These are the pieces we have now. What are we going to do with it? What new pieces do you want?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's powerful stuff. Ranger, tell us as we close out, tell us how can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram, withinrange_coaching. My website is withinrangecoaching.com. So those are the best places to find me.
And we'll have that in the show notes so people can find you and easily click on those links. Also, as I do with everyone else on the podcast, I think it's an important part of your story, and it's an important part of my intention with the podcast is to be able to, like you said, we all rise together. So who would you like to acknowledge, individuals or organizations or causes, to maybe give some credit to, or to recognize, celebrate, or just give a little extra publicity to, because maybe they don't get enough publicity? So who would you acknowledge?
All right, I got several. The first one, of course, is Northern California Herpetological Society, based out of Sacramento. If you're looking for a pet reptile or amphibian, hit me up, get you situated. The other one is Wild Care Bay Area. I have one of my good friends works there, and they do a lot of good work for the native wildlife. California FFA did a lot of work with them. They're kind of a big reason why I am where I am in terms of the agricultural side, public speaking, leadership. And the last one is my lovely girlfriend. She does a lot of travel work and really loves what she does, and just want to kind of acknowledge her for that.
Nice. Awesome.
Put yourself out there.
We will have all of this in the show notes, and I invite everyone to, as with every guest in every episode, to click on these links and see learn a little bit about these organizations and individuals as it relates to your story, and also so that folks can add it to their own story as well. It's an opportunity for learning. Ranger, thank you so much. This has been a great episode as always, and I look forward to the ongoing conversations that you and I will have beyond the episode. But I want to wish you a wonderful week, and thank you again.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
What an honor it is to witness these stories from these amazing human beings, and today's guest was no exception. I invite you to think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. I can't tell you how magical it can be to set aside your expectations and just let your thoughts flow out of your head and onto paper. You don't have to have an agenda. You don't have to do anything with it, but you can be amazed at what comes out of your thoughts and onto paper and what that can do for you. I know freestyle journaling has been a powerful practice in my life for a very long time. You just never know what you might discover about yourself. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. Follow me on social media at Off the Comma, and also look for upcoming workshops and events at offthecomma.com, or better yet, go to offthecomma.com and sign up for my mailing list and let me bring the news directly to you. I am passionate about keeping this podcast ad-free so that we create a safe container for people to be able to tell their stories uninterrupted by commercials and promotions. I currently cover all the production costs, and I'm happy to continue doing so. And I'm also open to and appreciative of any donations that anyone would like to contribute. This is nothing more than to be able to support the podcast and cover some of the monthly editing and producing and equipment costs that are associated with this podcast. So look for the donations link in the podcast descriptions wherever you find this podcast. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast, and more importantly, spread the good word. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. As always, keep noticing.